everybody. We are going to talk about our next project, and the purpose of the project is to practice shading. Remember, we're continuing to use value to make things look realistic or to make things look three-dimensional on our paper. And so for your project this time, you're going to be practicing with facial features. We're going to do some portraits later on in the semester, but practicing facial features is a good idea anyway. You can always learn something every time you draw, and facial features are a good thing to know how to do when we get to our portraits. If you've spent some time kind of focused on noses and eyes and mouths, you will be much better prepared to draw a realistic portrait. Keeping in mind that not all portraits have to be realistic. You don't always have to draw things using realism. But even if you're drawing abstractly or you're, doing it in a different non-realistic style, you still need to know the basic shapes and concepts behind the facial features so that you can get the look that you're going for, even if that look isn't realism, okay? So I'm going to just show you a couple of tips. We're going to do noses, and we're going to do eyes, and we're going to touch on lips too, okay? For your project, you're going to do 3 of each, and they can all be on 1 2-page spread, okay? So 3 noses, 3 eyes, 3 lips. They do not have to be the same at all. There are a million different types of noses, just like there are a million different types of people. Everybody's going to have a slightly different nose shape. Same thing with your eyes. You can try different expressions if you want to for your eyes. It's up to you how you decide you're going to do that. And then I'm just going to give you some tips about drawing eyes before you start, and then we'll talk about lips, okay? So let's talk about noses first. No matter which, this one is kind of from the side, but no matter which style nose you're planning to do, I would study some different noses. I would look at people and I would, flip through your phone at some different photographs and see maybe what types of shapes of noses people have. And then when you start to draw them, they're basically, if you're breaking it down into a shape, it's basically a circle. And remember, we talked about if you move your hand in a circle motion and then put your pencil down, it's easier to draw a good circle. And then 2 smaller circles to the side. So I always like to start with just the basic shape of something, and I'm going to erase this one I have above it. Just to kind of break it down so you kind of know what you're dealing with, and you'll get rid of those lines later. And then I try not to put lines up here because most of this part of the nose is going to all be done with shading. You don't really want it to be, like an outline, but you're going to show that it pops off of the page because of the shadows and the shading that you do. So the first thing that we're going to do is kind of outline where the nostrils are going to go, and this little pivot between these 2 circles, the big circle and the little circle, that's going to show you where this goes. And I think the biggest mistake people make when they're shading a nose is that they make the nostril a definite hole, like a definite oval, and they shade it kind of like that, and it just kind of makes it too round. It makes it look almost like a pig nose. So you're going to practice kind of reducing your pressure on your pencil, and this part up here will get really dark. And then the parts that overhang of the nostrils, like on the outside of your nostril, that goes below this part. So make sure you're not just evening it up. It's going to go below it. And then once you do that and you kind of have outlined where things are going to go, you will start to kind of define this space a little bit and darken this area up, and then pull your shadow out a little bit more. Then you're going to get rid of these shapes so that you can do your shadows a little bit better, your shading a little bit better. So let's talk about erasers really quick. This is the eraser that was in your kit. You might have other erasers that you love. Right now, my favorite eraser is this black eraser, and it just is so clean. Everything that it does is really, really sharp and clean. I'm dropping stuff here. The other eraser that I love is this pen eraser. You can see that. You can do really precise erasing, like if I want to get a little highlight, or if I want to highlight the bridge of that nose, I can do it really easily in specific spots. So it's almost like drawing, but with an eraser. And then probably one of your most valuable tools, I don't know, I think I've dropped mine, is this kneaded eraser. I've got this one. And a kneaded eraser, if you don't have one, it's probably a good investment if you're serious about drawing, because you can shape it into like a little point if you want to, and you can pick up graphite without rubbing on your drawing, so it makes it a little bit easier just to get a highlight of something without having to erase across it. And then you just fold it back up and make it into a point, or you can just make it into a ball if you're doing a big area. And then my guilty pleasure eraser, because I don't know if I always thought, why do people need an electric eraser? But when I was in college, we were required to get an electric eraser, and now I just can't do without one. So it seems like super frivolous, like you do not need an electric eraser, but it's such a good thing, because when you really want to clean something completely, this takes it all the way. It just disappears. So without a lot of rubbing, it's great for like an eye or something that you want to get a really sharp highlight on. So if you want to be frivolous and you love preciseness, an electric eraser is a cool little thing. So once you get your basic outline shaped out, you're going to kind of start defining it. And y'all, when you're shading this, I would hold your pencil like this. I wouldn't hold it like this, because you're going to get sharp little lines. And you can practice, like if you're holding your pencil like that, you're going to get really precise deep lines that you may not want. But if you hold it from the side overhand, you can get wide shading, and that's going to be a little more beneficial. So I'm going to take this and kind of get rid of the lines that are my guidelines, those circle shapes, because I don't want those to show up in my shading. And then as you start to shade, you want to go in the same direction that those guidelines were and that your nose is. Now, the parts that come away from your body, like the bridge of your nose, the things that are farthest away from your body, that's going to be the lightest. And then the things that are closest will be the darkest. So, like over here, on the outside of your nose, there's going to be a little shadow. And then you can just start to kind of refine and refine and refine until you get to here. But it takes a long time. It's a lot of layers, and it's a lot of going back over, going back over. You can use your blending stump to kind of shade with it and draw with it. Sometimes that's a little better than just your pencil, and you really don't want any of it to be just as white as the paper. The highlight, you want it to be a little bit of graphite. So you can just draw with that, and you can keep going, and then you're just going to get more and more precise. And what makes a drawing kind of pop and more realistic, or more lifelike, I would say, is the contrast between light and dark. So if you kind of feel like your drawings are flat, you probably don't have enough values in there. You probably have like medium and light, but you need some dark values to kind of make things start to come to life. So play around with it. I would practice a few before you get to your final page of your 3 noses. I would practice some different shapes. If you want to do some from the side, you can. It's really up to you. The purpose of the project is just to practice facial features. They don't have to be, I mean, so many of mine are messed up. Like this one, I was like, what in the world is happening right there? I gotta go back and shade that better. And so the idea is not to get a perfect representation on this, but to practice how value works on it, and just to see, you know, which way you like it, just to try out different techniques. So it's going to take some time though. Don't rush through it. It's going to take some time to get all of the layers and all of the things that you want. So here are a couple of tips for your eyes. I drew 3 different kinds of eyes right here. Or this one's a little, you know, just the expression is just a little bit different. But I just want to give you a couple of quick tips, and then I'll show you in the stop action the shading it. This takes a really long time. So don't rush through on your shading, because I think one mistake that people make when they start drawing is they think that everybody draws really quickly. But the truth is, you know, a good eye might take a couple of hours, you know, to really sketch that out. And if you start researching famous artists and how long they spent on things, it's really reassuring in a way, because if you're just spending, you know, 10 minutes on it and you're like, gosh, mine is not going to be that good. You know, if I spent 5 minutes on this, but if I spent 2 hours on it, what would it look like? Or if I, you know, really studied it and really took my time and put little layers down instead of trying to rush through, these would be a lot better. So take your time on it. You don't have to spend 10 hours on it, but I'm just saying, if you are trying to draw it in 5 minutes and you're thinking that you should be able to draw a super realistic anything in 5 minutes, you shouldn't be able to. It's going to take lots of layers and lots of time. Okay, so here is just a couple of suggestions that I would give you when you are drawing eyes. First thing, start again with that circle for the iris of your eye. And then this line of the eyelid cuts across that. If you're going above it, it's not going to be right. It goes across that. And then it's almost an oval, but it's like a tear duct little part over here that you've got to include. And then the other thing you want to be sure to include is this little space between your face. I don't know the word for that. I don't know why I can't think of words right now, but this, where your eye connects the bottom to your face, your eyelashes at the bottom don't come right out of where your white of your eye is. It's on the outside of that. So if you forget that space, it's not going to look as realistic. Then don't forget this part is your brow bone. And if you don't have that, it's not going to look as real. Now, depending on the shape of your face, you might have a really wide brow bone. You might have hardly any, right? So it just depends on the shape of the person's face that you're drawing. And you can draw from a photo reference if you want to, or you can just practice just a generic eye. And then up here for the eyebrow, I think it's a good idea just to block it out and then go back and do the individual hairs as you're going. And then here's the other little tip, is that when you are doing the pupil, it's a hole in real life. So where all of the light is coming in. So it's going to be super, super, super dark, but there might be a little highlight in it. But, I mean, it is dark, dark, dark. That's going to be your darkest value. And then as you're starting to shade the iris, every layer that you put on there, I would go out in this direction. And then you're just going to have to build up layer after layer after layer. And then as you build up each layer, you can start to get those darker, darker little details in there, and just keep going as dark as you can. Underneath this eyelid is going to be a shadow. So when you get to this part of the shading, don't forget to make this part darker, because otherwise it won't look like this overlaps that. So think about where the cast shadows are and where it is going to be darker. And then even in the this part of your eye, you don't want it to be white, white, white. You want it to have some value. And this may be where you want to use your blending stump to draw with, because you just want it to be such a slight little shadow. And I've even got that probably even a little too dark just for that. So but this part will be shaded in. The other big thing I think that will help you is your eyelashes. They don't go, like if this was the top of your eye, they don't go straight up, and they're not really straight, and they don't all go in just one at a time and all in the same direction. If you really look at someone's eyelashes, they curve, and this is going to be kind of a quick motion, and then you're going to go back just like everything else with layers, and they kind of crisscross each other, and they go above that line that we made for the brow line, or not the eyebrow, but like your brow bone, okay? So, and then as they get in front of you right here, they're going to be shorter because you're looking at them straight on. So from the side, you're going to see it a little bit longer, and then of course the lashes down here at the bottom are not going to be as long, and there's not going to be as many of them, okay? So that's just some little tips. I'll show you on the time lapse how I shaded this one, but just play around with that. Do 3 different eyes, so 3 noses, 3 eyes, and 3 lips. When you're doing these lips, the biggest thing, and I don't know what is happening with this top lip of mine, I don't know where I went astray, but the best thing I think to do is to draw the line. You could start really with a straight line and then come around that, but what you need is the line where your lips kind of come together, where your mouth comes together, and then you're going to get rid of this little guideline once you do it. You can measure, if you want, how that's going to play out, okay? So just kind of give that some thought and think about it. And then once you get that done, you're just going to give an impression down here, but you don't really want to outline it. And then you can decide if the person's lips are kind of flat or if they're like a cupid bow. That's what that's called, where it's like really pronounced. But it might be a man's lips, or it might be someone with, you know, not as full lips. So get the shape right first, and then once you get the shape right, you're going to be shading this. I would start as light as you can. Go as light as you can and get like a base layer, and then you are going to be shading in the shape that the lips go, and those little lines are going to help to look like the wrinkles of this lip. So when you get here, it's going to go this direction. And then you also need to be thinking about where the highlights are and where, you know, where the cast shadow would be on your lip. This part where your lips come together is going to be super dark. All right. So I'll show you on the time lapse how that all comes together. But try out 3 different lips. You might even want to try an open mouth. But see what you can do with the shading and try and make it as real looking as you can. All right, let's see how we do.